In the early 2000s, the town of West Haven, Connecticut, held a shadowy secret buried beneath its gritty streets. Known locally as Gasoline Alley for its stretch of industrial garages, auto body shops, and backlot mechanics, the area had always been rough. But something darker was at play. The first woman to vanish was Melanie Ruth Camillini in January 2003. A mother of two who had struggled with drug addiction, Melanie had recently begun trying to turn her life around. But like many who fell into the margins, her disappearance didn't make headlines. She was last seen climbing into a blue van, reportedly with a man who offered her work or a ride. That van was William Devin Howell's. Police opened a missing person file, but without a witness or a crime scene, there was little they could do. Months passed, then years. Melanie was not the only one. William Devin Howell was a drifter with a dark streak hidden beneath a mild-mannered appearance. He presented himself as helpful and approachable, even charming in a disarming way. But behind the wheel of his rusty blue van, he harbored violent fantasies. The van, ominously dubbed his murder mobile by investigators, was the center of his twisted world. Between February and October 2003, 6 more women disappeared. Nilsa Arizmendi, 33, vanished in July. Her boyfriend reported seeing her get into a van with a man matching Howell's description. Diane Cusack, 55, was last seen in summer. Joy Evelyn Martinez, 23, disappeared under mysterious circumstances. Mary Jane Menard, 40, a known sex worker, also vanished in 2003. Janice Roberts, 44, a transgender woman, was last seen in June. Marilyn Gonzalez, 26, disappeared without a trace. Each victim had a fragile connection to the streets, poverty, addiction, sex work, that made them invisible to much of society. Howell exploited that. He was careful, predatory, and always calculating. In interviews with the FBI later, agents noted Howell's ability to blend in. He wasn't flamboyant. He didn't draw attention to himself. He kept the low-cost motels and always paid cash. He moved just enough to avoid suspicion, yet stayed in familiar hunting grounds. His manipulation was not loud. It was strategic. Inside his van, Howell kept a hellish setup, tools, restraints, tarps. He called it his mobile torture chamber. FBI profilers later described Howell as a lust killer, someone driven by a fantasy that merged control, violence, and sexual desire. What made him more dangerous was how ordinary he appeared. Howell later confessed to sexually assaulting and killing some of the women while they were restrained. He kept one of the bodies wrapped in plastic for weeks, sleeping beside it in the van. The FBI would later describe this behavior as indicative of deep necrophilic tendencies and complete emotional detachment from human empathy. The gruesome details revealed that Howell didn't just kill, he controlled, dominated, and dehumanized. One chilling revelation: he called the wooded area where he buried the bodies his garden. According to psychological assessments later conducted by federal forensic experts, Howell was not merely a killer. He was a collector. He believed the bodies were part of him, a permanent part of his story. "It's where I go to think," he reportedly told investigators when referring to the remote burial site. The breakthrough came in 2007, for years after murders. Investigators found human remains behind a strip mall in West Haven, at the very edge of Gasoline Alley. It was a shallow grave, and more would be found. The Connecticut State Police and FBI forensic teams were called in. In total, the remains of 7 women were discovered, all buried close together. It was a mass grave hidden in plain sight. FBI profilers and forensic psychologists were brought in to assess Howell's behaviors. What they found was a man who compartmentalized his crimes. By day, he worked landscaping jobs. By night, he hunted. The FBI evidence response team described the crime scene as one of the most complex in Connecticut history. The soil had to be dug carefully, inch by inch. Some bodies had been dismembered. Howell buried them in shallow graves, using tarps, garbage bags, and blankets. He returned often to graves. He talked to them, In 2015, William Devin Howell entered a guilty plea to the murders. He confessed to the brutal killing of all 7 women, leading investigators to the precise locations of some of the graves. His chilling words, "I didn't want them to be forgotten." FBI special agents noted that Howell's willingness to talk wasn't due to guilt, but ego. He wanted credit. He wanted his garden to be remembered. At sentencing, the families of the victims gave heart-wrenching statements. Howell, emotionless, offered an apology that rang hollow. He was sentenced to 6 consecutive life terms. The FBI's Behavioral Analysis Unit categorized Howell as a classic organized killer, intelligent, methodical, with a need for control. But they also identified key features of a sadistic personality disorder and narcissistic traits. Howell kept trophies. He revisited sites. He even spoke to his victims post-mortem. One agent noted, he treated them like objects, disposable. But in death, they became possessions to him. That's why he buried them together. It wasn't just hiding evidence. It was building a legacy. Howell's interviews provided rare insight into the psychosexual motivations behind his crimes. According to BE reports, Howell described feeling powerful and untouchable. He enjoyed driving around with his victims after death, often holding conversations with them. In his mind, they were still present, proof of his dominance and control. The families of the victims had fought for years, searching alleyways, shelters, and graveyards for any clue. Many were ignored by authorities in the beginning, dismissed due to the victims' backgrounds. But each woman had a name, a history, children, parents, pain. The FBI eventually created a victimology profile, connecting the disappearances, and pressured local agencies to reclassify the cases as likely related homicides. Had this happened sooner, Howell might have been caught earlier. The case triggered a reevaluation of how local departments and federal agents prioritize missing persons, especially those in vulnerable populations. William Devin Howell may never be released. He is serving 360 years behind bars. But the fear he planted, his garden of death, remains. Gasoline Alley is quieter now, though the shadows haven't lifted. In 2021, a memorial was built near the burial site. It features 7 stones, each etched with a victim's name. Families still visit. And for the FBI, the Howell case remains a textbook example of how serial killers can, and do, go unnoticed when their victims are forgotten by society. Howell's name is now listed in federal databases alongside the likes of Ted Bundy and Gary Ridgway. A reminder, monsters don't always wear masks. Sometimes they drive blue vans, smile politely, and keep to themselves until darkness calls.